In this video, I'm going to show you 17 nodes to pretty much master n8n, as these are what you will use 80 to 90% of the times as you build client workflows. If you don't know who I am, I'm Folu. I've scaled my agency to over 100k per month, and the vast majority of workflows, we use these 17 nodes. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. The first nodes we have here are the trigger nodes, and these trigger nodes are essentially the start of any workflow. You can see we have three different types of triggers here. We have the trigger where you can click to execute, we have a schedule trigger, and we have a fill out trigger. The click to execute trigger is basically us triggering a workflow manually. Every time I want to start a workflow that has this trigger right here, I would have to press execute this manually, and you can see it will go ahead and execute that for me. If we come in here, there's nothing to configure. It's simply just manually executing a workflow, and whatever you have after this, whatever workflow you have after this is going to trigger whenever you press this execute button. I have the schedule trigger over here, and like in the name, it's going to schedule on a certain time. So these are the start of your workflows, and if we wanted to start a specific workflow at a certain time, then we would use the schedule trigger. If we click in here, we can see all of the different types of schedules we can use. So we can select the trigger interval. We can do it every day, we can do it every minute, every hour. Let's say I was building a workflow for a client and they wanted us to build an AI email agent that would answer their emails every single minute. What I would do in here is come in here and select minutes, and then I would change this to whatever they wanted. Maybe if they wanted us to check every 1 minute, then we could do that. If they wanted us to check every 1 hour, then we could do like 59. And that would basically run this trigger every 1 hour, go grab the emails and answer them emails every 1 hour. So that's a schedule trigger. Now these two triggers are native to n8n, meaning that n8n has built these triggers. But over here we have another trigger which is fill out, and this is a form builder. So whenever somebody fills out a form, if I click in here, you can see whenever somebody fills out the form with this name, then this node is going to trigger. Now to give it a quick test, we can try it by running this right here. I can come over to this form that it's waiting on. I can fill in some details. Let's say hi there for here, and when I submit this, if we come back over here to n8n, you can see we receive that data over here. Now n8n hasn't built this node. Fillout has built this node for their software, so we can use it in n8n. But these two are native. This one is a kind of like an outside app in which we can still use as a trigger. If we jump in here, you can see all of the details that we've just filled out. They're the main things you need to know about triggers. In most scenarios, you're either going to use an n8n native one, like if you wanted to use a schedule trigger, or you will use this specific app one that you want to use. So in some cases, you may use like a let's say it's a Telegram or a Gmail trigger, in which it triggers every time you receive a message. But there's the general gist of what triggers are. The next thing we have is storage, and this is pretty straightforward. We have n8n native storage and we have Google Sheet storage. So in any workflow that you need to store something into a database, then you can either use n8n or Google Sheet. Now in here, if we want to insert a row, then on the n8n one, we can click in here and you can see it's asking us for a table firstly, a name of a table, in which we can select. I only have one table, which is AI Recruiter. I don't really use this too often. I'd rather use Google Sheet, but you can use n8n's basically built-in Google Sheet, and you can choose a bunch of different operations. So we can delete a row, we can get a row, we can insert a row, update, upsert, and so on. Now if we wanted to add a row to this table right here, so you can see I have one table right here and we have one row in it. If I wanted to add a row to that, then I would come back out here. Firstly, let's bring this down. Like I mentioned, anytime we are testing, we'll use this manual trigger, and you can see in here I have some hard-coded information. So I have my name and I have a number 1 2 3 4 5 6, and if we trigger this, it's going to go over there. It's going to store it in that n8n table. If I come over here to the data tables on n8n, give it a quick refresh, we should be able to see that information. So you can see that information that I just stored in here, my name and the number 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now the same applies to Google Sheets, and in most cases I would recommend that you just use Google Sheets, because I'm pretty sure n8n has some limitations on how much you can store in this. So if you're using, I don't know, if you get a big client and they're storing a lot of information, then I would just recommend you use Google Sheets. Now Google Sheets is the same thing. If we want to add something to a row, we're going to select a append row, which basically means add something to this row. We're going to choose the actual sheet that we want to add something to. So you can see over here, I have a sheet called Personal Trainer CRM. We also have one row in this already. Now, if I want to add another row to that, then we're going to do the same thing where we come over here and we put some information in here. Again, I have this hard coded. When you're building these for clients, you put in a variable here from the previous notes. But you can see here, we have name, number, and booking type. These are some test information. I connect up my manual trigger. If I trigger this now, it gets stored in the Google Sheet. If we jump over here to Google Sheet, you can see we have that information over here on Google Sheet. Now, both of these are basically the same thing. In most cases, just use Google Sheet. It's a better one to use. Now, let's say in the same Google Sheet that we were just using, I wanted to get all of the rows that are in that sheet. What I would do is come down here, select Get Rows, and this is going to basically return all of the rows in that sheet. So if I press Execute Step, you can see on this left hand side we get 2 items and we get all of the information. So we get that first row. If we jump in here, you can see all of the information from that first row, and over here on n8n it has returned all of the information from that first row. If we jump over here to JSON, we can see the second row, which is the one that we've just appended, and you can see all of the information from there. That's a data store. In most cases, you're either going to add information or get information from a data store. 90% of the time, that's all you will be using. Now, that's the data storing section covered. The next thing we have down here is data handling. Now, in your workflows, if it's in any way complex, you are definitely going to use data handling. That's why I've added it into here. Now, the ones we are worried about is split out and aggregate. So if I connect this up here, and if I run this node, if I execute this step, you can see it gives us one item but an array of leads in that item. Now, there's an issue with this. It's one item and a bunch of leads within that one item. We don't want it to use just one item, because one item basically means run this next node once. Now, what if we had a Google Sheet node like this one right here, and it was connected to right here? What it would do is basically store this lead and basically only store the first one, because one item, as we see up here, means just run the next node once. So if we wanted to store information, let's say we wanted to store every lead in here, we wanted to store Sarah, James, Emma, and so on. If I connected up this Google Sheets node and I come over here to append a row, you can see down here, when it gives us the names, we can only store one name at a time. You can see in here, we can only store one name. So if this was connected up there, it would simply only store the first person's name. Now, in most cases, that's not what you want to do. If you receive an array of names, you want to store all of them. So what you would do is add a split out node. And in a split out node, you select the fields you want to split out, and it's basically just going to split this out into separate items. So you can see in here, when you want to select the fields, just bring this over, drag over the leads that we want to split out, and we can press execute step. And now you can see over here, we receive 5 different items. So we've received one item in, we've now received 5 different items. So if we now come up here and grab the Google Sheet, then it's going to run that Google Sheet, except it's going to run it 5 times and it's going to store each lead. So for example, we can give this a quick test right now. So if I come over here and let's connect up this Google Sheets node, and imagine we get an array. So if I connect this up here, let's say we wanted to try and store every lead's name. So let's say I grab this lead's name. You can see this is only going to store Sarah Mitchell. So if I execute this whole workflow now, let's again grab this manual trigger right here. Let's connect it up to here. Let's execute this workflow. You can see the workflow has now finished. And if we jump over here, it has only added Sarah Mitchell's name. Now, if we do the split out in between that, so if we bring this over now, let's disconnect this right here. Let's bring this split out in, and let's now connect that up to the Google Sheets node. Now come in here and run this split out. So you can see it now splits it out into 5 different items. Let's come up here to the Google Sheets node and let's add in the split out node name. Let's add that in here. And now if we run this whole workflow, you can see the one item comes in of all the leads, which is one array, splits it out into 5 different items and stores them over here 5 different times in Google Sheets. If we come over here to Google Sheets, you can see we have all of the names split out into their own columns over here. So that's what the split out node does. Now the next node we have over here is the aggregate node. The aggregate node just does the opposite of what the split out node does. So as you can see here, the split out node takes in one item and splits it into 5 different items. The aggregate node is going to take in multiple items and spit it out as just one item. So if we connect this up here and we come into the aggregate node, we can select what we want to aggregate. So in here, let's say we want to aggregate all of the input items into a single list. I could select that, and we can select the name that we want to output it as. So let's say I wanted to output it as leads new, and then we can include all fields or we can include specific fields. So let's include all fields, and when I press execute step, you can see over here now we received the leads as one item. This splits it out into 5 different items, and the aggregate node is going to combine them back again into one item, and we have all of the leads here with the leads name leads new. That's what the aggregate node does. Now we have the if node over here, which is in these AI automations or these workflows. A lot of it is just logic, so you're going to use this a lot of times. So let's get rid of this aggregate node for now, and let's connect up these items. And now it's going to give this if node 5 different items. So what if we want to do something where we only wanted to go through the true node if the name is Sarah? So I can bring over the name here. We can say if the name string, we can say if the name string contains Sarah, and type in Sarah, then go true. And if we execute this now, then you can see we have 1 item that goes true and 4 items that are false. So you can do whatever you want, ignore that and so on. And if we click in here, then we can see the true branch, Sarah, went true, and in the false branch, all of these names don't contain Sarah, so they are considered false. Now, in most scenarios, you will need to do more than just if, true or false. If you need to do more than just if, then you would connect it up to here. Then you would connect it up to this next node, which is called a switch node. Now, this switch node, we can add in multiple things. So you can see here, we can add in multiple routing rules. So I can add in 1, 2, 3. So what we can do in here now is we can say if the name is equal to Sarah, then choose route number 1. We can say if the name is equal to, let's look for a bunch of names. So if the name is equal to James, then you can choose this route. And then if the name is equal to Emma, then you can choose this route. So if we drag down all of these names, and if the name is equal to Emma, then choose this route. So we're going to change these actually to contains, so we don't have to type in the exact name. So we can, if the name contains Emma, or if the name contains James, or if this name contains Sarah, then choose these routes. Now, if we run this, you can see we get 3 items through here, and all of the rest of the names that don't contain one of them 3 names, so these last ones, David and Rachel, just get ignored. And we can see on the outputs of each of these, for output 1, the name is Sarah. For output 2, it's James. Or for output 3, we have Emma. So it chooses the selective route, and we could decide what to do there. Now, where this is useful is if we are processing emails for a client. Let's say we have an email agent set up, and they say we have an AI node before here, and we tell the AI node to output a specific letter, like if the email is FAQ, then output FAQ. If the email is serious, then output serious. Or if the email is sales, then output sales. And we can do that, and whenever we get the AI output, we can put it in here, and we can decide which route to take. So let's say if it's serious, we choose route number 1, and we can bring it up here and just make it email the leader or the manager of the company. If it's FAQ, then we can bring it down here and just have another AI respond. Or if it's sales, and we can bring it down here and connect it to a sales agent, and that's where you would use the switch node. The last node over here for data handling is the code node. You don't need to know how to code to be able to use this. In most of the scenarios that I have a code node is when there is no node in n8n to do something that I'm looking to do, or if it's going to require too many switch nodes. So let's say we have a scenario where we have to do a bunch of data validation or a bunch of routing logic based on a certain income, and we want a certain outcome. I don't want to add 7 switch nodes. I would just go over to Claude. I would explain what I need to do. I would then tell Claude to output it as JavaScript so I can use it in my n8n code node. And it outputs, in most cases, the perfect JavaScript that you can use, and just paste in here. And even over here, you can even ask the n8n AI, which is not too good, but for basic scenarios it will work. You can come over here and say something like, hey, can you build me a code block that will output only if the name input contains Emma. So we can press generate code, and this should generate the code. This is a very simple scenario. So you can see here, I've told it output only the names that contain Emma. And if I quickly run this now, then you can see it outputs 1 item. The 1 item is going to be the name that's Emma. Obviously, you can do this with a switch node, but you can imagine if it gets really, really complex and a switch node is going to be a little too simple, then you can come in here and ask code to do it. And in most cases, it's completely fine. You will never need to know how to code to use this. The next thing we have is connections and APIs, and this is by far the most important part about building anything. Now, this HTTP request is the reason that other apps are able to talk to other apps. So for example, when we made that node over here, you can see when we were adding something to a Google Sheet, that was an API call, which is a HTTP request. That's how we were able to use that. Now, you're probably wondering, why do we need this if I was just able to use that Google Sheets node? Well, if we come in here and we come over to the available apps here on n8n, we can scroll down to the end very quickly. Now, what if there's not an app in here that we need to use? Let's say I'm working with a client, they have a specific app that they want us to get information from. Do we just cancel the build if we're not able to find it in here? No, the reason for HTTP requests is so you're able to connect to anything. So for example, let's say I'm working with a client that is doing crypto. He's in the crypto market and he wants me to connect to this and send him reports every weekend or every day or every evening, whatever. If I come over here, you can see this app is called Market Stack. Now let's say that app called Market Stack, I search it up in here and there is no app called Market Stack on this. Well, how do I connect to it? It's going to be by using this HTTP node. Now to connect to this HTTP node, we have to come over here to Market Stack and we have to figure out what they need from us in order to connect to it. So in most apps, you can come over here, in most softwares, you can come over here to a section called documentation, or if it's not on their website, just come up here and look up Market Stack documentation. Google will always give it to you, but I'm going to come in here to the documentation and I'm going to find out what they need from me in order to connect to it. So you can see we have the marketplace AI. Come down here to the API endpoints, and let's say a very basic one, I wanted to get an EOD data. Now an EOD data is basically giving you information on a stock. So it's telling me here the API base URL, so the person that we are going to call is this person right here. So I'm going to copy this right here, I'm going to bring it back over to the HTTP and I'm going to tell it to get information from this URL. That's basically telling this HTTP request, get information from this app, because it's obviously not in n8n, so we need to use this. Now it also tells us that we need an access key in order to connect to this, and it gives us some more information over here. Most of the time, if I'm connecting to an app, I will copy this, I'll bring it over to Claude or ChatGPT, and I will say create the curl to connect to this app. I'll paste all of that information in here, and now this is going to output the exact information that we can use over in n8n. So you can see here, gives me the curl that I can use. If I want to get the basic EOD, you can see here, I'm going to copy all of this, bring it over here to n8n, and up here in the import curl, I'm just going to paste it in right here, and I'm going to input it right into there. Now you can see it's asking me for an API key. An API key is basically telling the app that I'm allowed to use this because you gave me this key. So over here in the app, you'll come over to the app. Most of the time, the documentation is not going to have an API key because everybody has access to the documentation. So what's the point of putting an API key there? They're in most cases going to ask you to log in before you can get an API key. So when I log in, it gives me this key right here. I bring it over to n8n and I would paste that key right into here. And then down here we have the symbols. So what stock do you want to get the information from? This one right here is Apple. So we've given it the symbols for Apple. Don't worry, most coders or most Forex or whatever they are will know what this means. So you can put that in here. And then when we press the execute step, it's going to give us all of the information on Apple at the moment. So you have the limits, the offsets, the counts, the total. I have no idea what any of this means. I'm not going to pretend like I do, but this is the information that the client is asking for. They've asked us, can you get me the information on Apple, the EOD or whatever it is? And we've just gone ahead and we've done it by connecting it to a HTTP and putting in an API key. In most scenarios, when you're connected to HTTP, you're going to have to put in a URL and an API key, in which I've just shown you exactly how to do. Then the second thing over here for connections is webhook. A webhook is basically going to trigger whenever somebody sends information over to you. It's the exact same as this right here. Now obviously Fillout has a native app inside n8n, so you don't have to go around creating a webhook. But again, if they didn't have an app right here, I would have to connect it to a webhook and say to Fillout, trigger this webhook. Now to test how a webhook works, I'm going to come in here and you can see we have a test URL and production URL. Pretty straightforward. If it's in production and you're actually using it for a client, then use that. If it's in test, then use a test. Now when you are testing a webhook, you can come over here to Postman. It's an app called Postman where you can basically test if a webhook is working or test how they work. And if we come back over here to n8n, and if I trigger this webhook, if I trigger this right here, and I come over here to Postman, if I paste my information into here, and I give it this simple message over here in the body, raw, send over a simple message, which is hi there. If I press send on this, you can see that was just sent over. We get a 200 OK, which means it was sent over. And over here, we get the message from Postman in what we sent over, which was message hi there. Now, when you're sending it over, you need to make sure that the HTTP method here is post, because over here the method is post. So this is posted information. So over here you need to make sure that this is also a receiving posting information. Over here for the HTTP, it's the same thing with post and get. So for example, when we wanted to get the Apple data, we changed this to get because we're not posting anything to the app. We want to get the information for the Apple stock, so we make it get. Don't worry about all of, in most scenarios you will use get and post. So give information or get information. For us, we want to get information from an app, so we are retrieving it over here in the HTTP. And then for the webhook, postman is the start, so this is posted information. So over here in the webhook, we make this post because that's the type of information it's going to receive. Over here in postman, when we sent over that message hi there, we received a status 200 OK, but in the body it's empty. It's completely empty. n8n didn't send anything back to us bar that the request went through. So if we come over here and we want to send something back to postman, or we want to send something back to an app, like yes, I've received your information, then I can come over here and I can add a respond to webhook node. In the respond with, then we can come down here and we can select just basic text, and I can say over here, I have received your info, and we can press, and now this is going to send information back over to postman. So if we run this one more time, and if I come over here to postman, I press send, you can see we've sent the information over. So we can send that information over to the webhook. It's going to respond back to postman now with the information, with that text that we just put in. And if we come back over here to postman now, you can see we sent over the message hi there, and we received the hi, I received your info back from n8n. And that's how webhooks are going to work. Now lastly, down here we have AI agents. Most of you have probably already used these. We have a simple messenger model node over here, which is just a simple, you get to choose which node or which AI you want to use. So let's say we wanted to use ChatGPT 5.2 Pro. In here we have different types of messages we can send over. Obviously we can send over text, an image, or a file. Most cases you're going to use text, and we have different roles in which we can send over. Now these are quite important because prompts are very brittle, they're very prone to error. So if you're not sending over the correct information, then you're going to have more errors than usual. Most people will just select user, type in all of the prompt and send it over. Now what you're meant to do is come in here and select system first and type in exactly who this AI agent is. So who this AI is meant to be. You would type stuff like, you're a helpful assistant for a real estate company to handle their emails, something like that, just giving the AI the personality of exactly who it is. Then nextly we have user, and this is the message that you want to send over. So for me, if I was setting this up, I would say system user, you are an AI that responds to emails for real estate agents. Then I would come down here and select the user as another message. I'd come down here and select user, and I would put in the actual email of the customer. So I'd put in the actual copy and pasted email that has to respond to, and then you can see down here, if we can add another message, you can see we can add in assistant, and this is basically giving it examples of how to respond. So what I would do here is I would say, here's an example message, put in the example message, and say, here's how you respond to this type of message, and put in the example response. And that's basically training the AI on what's good and what's bad. That's how you use the different types of AI inputs. Now that's just the message model. We can add very simple tools like a code tool or an MCP tool, but there's not much you can add. That's why you have AI agents over here, which you can add a bunch of different things. So we can add an input in here. In most scenarios, you're going to have a chat trigger or a WhatsApp trigger or an email trigger or something where you talk back and forth with an AI agent. Now in this AI agent, it's the same thing over here where you can add in user messages. So you can add in the prompt right here, which is the user message, like I mentioned, the actual email. Then down here, you can add in the system message. As you can see in here, it gives you a basic one, which you're a helpful assistant. And that's basically all you need over here. Then you can add in the chat model, so who you want to answer is a Claude, Anthropic, Gemini. We can add in memory. We can add in the simple built-in n8n memory, which is not good for production use cases, so I probably wouldn't use that. I would use one of these ones down here if you learn how to use them. And then for the tools over here, we can add a bunch of different things. So we can add like a Google Sheets if we wanted this AI agent to maybe be able to check who was on this over here. So if we wanted it to maybe check each person's name. If we wanted it to be able to send emails, then we can add an email trigger right here, send email tool. If we wanted it to, let's say we wanted to send emails to specific people. So you get the general idea. That's how AI agents work. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. All of these nodes are exactly all you really need to know how to use. You're going to use them 90% of the time when you're building workflows. If you want to download these to reference later on as you build more workflows, then you can click the second link in the description to go to my free WAP community. If you want to learn how I scaled my AI agency and get some one-to-one support on how you can scale your agency to 100k per month and further, then click the first link in the description where you can apply to join my program.